Hey everyone, and welcome to today's webinar on why most CPG rebrands fail and how to avoid the same fate. I know with my brand T Squares, I went through, oh gosh, probably 3 or 4 rebrands and design changes as our company evolved, as our product evolved, and frankly, as we learned more from customers. But it was really expensive, really time consuming, and I still felt like we never really got there. And so, and if you've been through the same, give us a thumbs up in the chat, and that way we can get a sense of if it's just me or if it's happening to everyone else. But wanted to spend today breaking down how you can set yourself up for success early in the process so that you can actually avoid that same fate. So for this conversation, I've invited on my friend Adam Feller with Avidity Creative. He does a ton of packaging design for CPG brands, which I do think is really important to understand how consumers actually buy food and beverage products, which can be different from other industries. I know at one couple times I worked with designers from other industries, and while it was great to bring an outside perspective, there's some really like key foundational elements of the packaging that was just missing. And I think that was really important to understand, which is why we had to change again. So anyway, Adam, welcome all up or on up, and we'll love to jump into things.
Awesome. Well, thanks, Jordan. Yeah, I appreciate the invite to do the webinar. Super excited to hopefully give you guys some great insights. Happy to connect also after the show and stuff too if we need. And I say show because I'm used to doing podcasts now, and now with videos, and I even had Jordan on our podcast, but I know this is not actually a show. So yeah. Anyway, I'm gonna share my screen here, and we'll just kind of dive in.
I know, Adam, I have to get a cool background like you have on your wall. That's my next project.
Yeah, a little bit of DIY hard work on and IKEA. Thank you, IKEA, for all these the shelves here, but
I love it.
a weekend of work there on that. Okay, cool.
All right, looks good.
We're all seeing my screen now. Cool. Well, first off, we're talking about why CPG rebrands, excuse me, fail. And this does not mean that all of them fail, of course, as you well know, but we're also going to talk about how you guys can avoid the same fate with your own rebrands. One thing I like to do when I'm starting, so like Jordan said, feel free to ask questions in the chat as yeah, as I'm going through the presentation. I've specifically told Jordan to I'll leave some breaks as I'm talking and let him interrupt me. If you guys have questions, we can kind of make this more interactive throughout the recording. But first off, in the chat, if you don't mind, like Jordan said, put your name, tell me like what your brand is, maybe where you're from. I find that when we're doing webinars, that a lot of people who are attending actually get as much information and connection from talking with each other. So if you can stay active in there, then that's always great too. Anyways, a little information about myself, my background. So I am the creative director and the owner of Avidity. We're a branding and design agency. My personal background is on the art direction and the creative direction side. I've been a graphic designer in various capacities all my career, and then started my company separately in 2017, and we focus specifically on emerging CPG brands. So I know a lot of you are early stage founders, maybe you're kind of getting to that stage where you've got traction now, you've been in business for a few years, and you're ready to kind of take it to the next level. So we work with a lot of emerging brands that we like to say we work with bold emerging brands that are ready to ready to challenge their category. So um, there we go. Okay. So a little bit about Avidity, I guess, before we kind of dive into everything else, just to give you more background. Like I said, we're a small branding agency focused on emerging brands. We do everything from brand strategy, brand identity, packaging design, all of your creative materials. So your sell sheet, if you're going to trade shows, we develop a trade show booth. Like I think I said, sell sheets, POP displays, basically anything on the creative side of your company, we are built to do. So we're a small team, but that is kind of what makes us capable of working with other smaller emerging brands versus large ones. So a few of these down here are just examples of some of the products we've been able to work on in recent years. And actually a lot of them are rebrands. So ton of experience with what we're talking about today. So why do some rebrands fail? Even big brands mess it up sometimes, and when they do it, it's often publicly. I could give you lots of examples of smaller brands that maybe have failed, but in my eyes, by telling you about those, number one, I don't like to put down lots of other smaller brands because we work with those people, and we want to be able to help them, and it's not really a good way to start out a conversation with telling them their branding sucks, right? But also, if I told you those small brands and it's a failed rebranding, odds are you don't know that brand anyways. So I want to point out a couple examples of some bigger brands that actually had some failed rebranding projects that they went through. So don't mind the slightly pixelated or blurry images here when it's scaled up really big, at least on my screen. These are just images I pulled from Google. So Tropicana is probably one of the more commonly known rebrands that were failed. I think this was back in, I want to say 2011, 2012, maybe. So you can see their original branding on the left and their updated branding on the right here. So these guys made this switch to new packaging, new logos, new brand identity, and almost immediately their sales just plummeted. And that was because, you can see that the packaging design actually looks good. It's kind of clever. They got the cap, looks like the half of an orange. Everything is a nice, clean look. You can tell that it's orange juice, I think, if you were to walk up to this in the store. But when their customers, the mistake that they made was when their customers are acclimated to this orange with the straw sticking out of it, the sort of layout, the logo that's upright here, this orange stripe. These are things that people cling on to when it comes to consumer behavior in a grocery store. It's stuff that you recall visually. And when they made that switch, people were looking all over for Tropicana that they used to buy every day or every week, I would say. And now they just can't find it. It's because they're looking for something that's not there anymore, just because it's changed. So another example, probably more recently, is Weight Watchers. I think this is 2022 maybe that they did this. So Weight Watchers, we all know about that organization and their sort of philosophies and stuff. They made this switch in 2022 when they wanted to take less of the focus on weight loss and put more focus on just general wellness with lifestyle. So they rebranded to WW. And you can tell again, it seems like an upgrade when it comes to the packaging design. It looks nice, it's clean, it pops on the shelf. I think the colors are great. It stands out, and you see this WW right away. The problem was that most people that are outside of their own organization don't know them as WW. So when people are looking for Weight Watchers branded products, they just can't find it. And when it comes to WW, I don't know what that is. So they made that switch to the name, like I said, because they wanted to drop the focus on weight. Um, and both of these brands, Tropicana and Weight Watchers, have since I don't know the word I'm looking for here, but they've basically gone back. They've canceled their rebranding within a year of it happening. So just goes to show that a brand can still look good or rebranding can look good, but when there's no strategy or data or context behind it, it can still be a failure, even when you have millions of dollars to work with. Okay, so here's the reasons why. These are probably the five maybe main or most common reasons why rebranding projects might fail. Of course, there may be others, but these are the ones I want to focus on today that I find are probably the most important. So number one, there's no strategy. Like the example on those last two, they maybe had strategies because they're bigger companies and they probably have a lot of money they're putting into strategy. But generally, if you're doing a rebranding project just because you want it to look better, you're going to be missing the mark a little bit. Number two, founder bottleneck. I'll dig in deeper to this one and later, and I'll do it with all of these actually. But founder bottleneck, as a founder, you can maybe get in the way a little bit, and we'll talk about how that happens. Wrong timing. Oftentimes we see smaller brands go through rebranding maybe earlier than they should, and sometimes there's brands that have waited too long to do it, and they've kind of missed their appropriate timing for that. Number four, small budget, big dreams. Of course, as you're going through rebranding, Ideally, you want to be able to have at least more budget to work with this time through than you did the first time. I would say don't ever expect to spend less on a rebranding than you did on your initial branding. And then number five, misaligned goals. This could be misaligned goals within your own internal team, or it could be misaligned goals with your branding agency that you're partnering with. So
Hey,
first of
Adam, one thing that I think is really interesting, so I love all these, is kind of like a quick conversation of like what is a brand? And I know it's like one of those very simple questions, but very difficult things. But I think that
all,
always helps to set the context of like what your packaging is even designed to do
yeah,
before deciding like to make a change or to not make a change or how to do
yeah.
it. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, so the general answer about what is a brand, it's really your controlled perception, excuse me, your controlled customer's perception of your products or of your company. It's your brand is a combination of your values, um, your understanding of your market positioning, um, and it's also your visuals, and then it's your messaging. So all those things together kind of create the overall brand. And there's a slide later on I'll talk about it, but your brand strategy really leads to what your brand identity or your visual identity is. And those things lead to your design materials, like your packaging, like your sell sheet, like your website, all of that. So,
Yeah, I love that. I mean, because I think that a lot of people either see, a lot of times they see brand as like just the visual parts, right? Your logo, the like colors, the packaging. And I think it was really unlocked to me when someone mentioned of like, first you need to, right, obviously be solving a problem for a customer, but then do so with a point of view and have a value set in mind. And then the visual identity and the packaging is a way of communicating that value set. But if that's not like really clear with a problem that you're solving in an audience, then the visual design almost doesn't matter from a business perspective because you don't have a strong foundation. And so even like Simran, you asked a question of like how this would be relevant for those just launching or you're getting started. I think it's probably those things of like understanding the problem that you're solving and how you are taking that on in your perspective and then being able to visually showcase that in a way that matters to the customers, right?
yeah, exactly. And you kind of touched on it a little bit, but being able, like you can redesign something to look better, but if you don't have a reason why you're doing something, odds are you're going to fall flat and you're just going to you'll miss the mark and being able to connect with your customer. So number one reason why most rebrands fail, and this is probably actually the most important, is there's no strategy. There we go. So it's just some example points here to make. Let's just update the packaging is not a strategy. Like I said, and I've already kind of touched on a couple of times. Just redesigning something for the sake of redesigning it or making it look better doesn't always lead to more sales or better shelf presence. Without a clear positioning, a rebrand won't fix your growth or your shelf presence. Branding needs purpose and not polish. So, like I said, understanding who your customer is, understanding your market, understanding what actually makes you unique, and then how do you take those things and put them into a visual and a written and a verbal, package that's going to allow, that's going to actually resonate and connect with someone on the shelf. So, give a couple examples here of what maybe a rebrand on a larger scale without strategy might look like. So we're all familiar probably with both of these brands. So Smart Water, when they came on the scene, they kind of I think they were probably one of the first as far as a pH balanced water. And PepsiCo thought, well, we need to get into this market too because these guys are kind of just taken over. There's a lot of market share for them to be able to get their piece of the pie. So PepsiCo started a brand called Life Water. And again, you guys are probably familiar with them. You've probably heard of them or seen their packaging, or excuse me, seen their products. And you can tell that the design is really good. They actually had this kind of unique approach where they used some different sort of artistic or illustrative styles that they incorporated into various different bottles. They all use a similar color scheme, so there's good cohesion there. But what they're missing is any sort of element that differentiates them from Smart Water. people look at that and either they're going to think, oh, this is just more smart water, or there's just nothing that really, there was no strategy behind the artwork piece. Like it was just like a cool thing to do, but there was no rationale, there was no reason for it that made sense with their products and how it actually helped them differentiate from smart water. On the other hand, a more recent brand that has come up a lot is Liquid Death. Again, just water. But the strategy behind this is, they've created a brand that's more rebellious. It's targeted towards a specific demographic. And of course, the packaging looks good, but it's going to stand out in this category of water because everything else you're used to seeing when it comes to bottled water is more like smart water or Aquafina or any other water brands you can think of. These guys are just so much different. So that strategy is working well for them. Now, if you can imagine this product being in the craft beer aisle, probably not going to stand out well. It's not going to, if this was instead of mountain water or sparkling water, it was just beer and IPA, it's going to be just like every other craft beer. So,
Adam, I'm curious with Liquid Death, and I have a lot of thoughts about it. Um, how you think about this in terms of strategy versus just visual design. Because on some, like on one hand, like you just said, like it looks like a craft beer, but in the water aisle, which is like different, is that enough, like a design enough to be strategically different, or is there something else kind of behind this decision that you think is driving the positioning?
beyond just packaging design, it's the tone of the rest of their messaging. If you look through their website, but also outside of the retail, like grocery store scene, look at the events that they are partnering with, what other placements they have, and just kind of how they approach the rest of their marketing. So they've built not just their packaging design, but their entire brand around this sort of ethos, this essence, right? So it's beyond. I mean, obviously the packaging design stands out in that category. That's the obvious thing, but they've built the brand outside of just that too. So, their messaging and how they interact, whether it's social media or other marketing materials too.
Yeah, I mean, I think what's interesting, right? Like in that Smart Water Life Water example, it seems like they're basically going after the same customer of maybe like a more fitness, white collar oriented consumer.
Yeah,
And Liquid Death with this, they're going after maybe a little bit more of a sometimes blue collar, sometimes like rebellious consumer who might drink water just from a generic bottle, but
yeah,
they're not thinking about the water brand. It's purely a commodity for them,
yeah.
and then
It's
this is something that they're like excited to drink. It almost reminds me of when people would buy Starbucks and like the Starbucks cup was iconic, but then they would refill it with other drinks just to have the Starbucks cup, right? Like the
yeah,
visual appeal of that is different for those customers than like a
yeah,
Liquid Death customer. Like it's something that someone would want to proudly show off that they're
yeah.
drinking water.
It's liquid death is water for people who drink Monster Energy but realize they also need to be hydrated.
Yeah, I love that. Cool.
Oh, sorry. I don't know if I can go back. There we go. Okay, yeah. So number two, too much founder input. So this sounds like a cocky, arrogant comment coming from a creative individual who just doesn't want, who wants our clients to let us do anything that we want. And that's not what I'm getting at. But oftentimes when we're working with, especially smaller brands where the founder is maybe the only person in the company or the one that has a lot more say and what their branding or their marketing looks like. So I guess the things I would say is first off, as a founder, if your background is not in marketing or you're not an expert in marketing, you know, this sounds bad, but kind of like stick to what you do know. Like I wouldn't ever go get a second opinion on my dentist's uh, you know advice on that I need to get a tooth pulled. If I did, I would go to another dentist. I wouldn't go to my friend who works at a bank, So first thing, as a founder, you know your product, but are you your own customer? Odds are you're not. There's a very few cases where our clients that we're working with, the founder happens to be the actual demographic that they're targeting. And you can maybe argue it's more often the case that they are targeting people like them, but it makes it really hard. And the second point here is founders often design for themselves and not for the people who are actually buying the product. It's really hard for founders to separate themselves from their brand or from their company and kind of think with an outside view of what the branding and their messaging should be like. The other mistake that we see a lot from especially smaller brands is getting feedback from every friend and cousin, rather than just trusting the advice of the branding or design agency that you're paying thousands of dollars to do their job. So the example that I just gave is a good one, but that's something that we fight pretty frequently with our clients of like, here's we'll present a concept to them, give a lot of rationale behind it, and they're like, okay, great, let me sit with it, and then they go get opinions from every person on Facebook and come back with changes to us that don't make any sense, and we're just wondering why they don't want to trust the agency that they've hired to do their part. So um, just an example here. So design by committee is equal to confusion by customers. When we're trying as a design company or a branding company to appease every person who's in the inner circle of our client, uh, there's a lot of people that we have to appeal to, right? And if none of them are our actual customers, but we're going to end up with a cluttered message on the other end of this. Number three, on reasons why rebrands often fail, wrong timing. So a rebrand won't save you if you're still figuring out your product market fit. I'll come back to that. If you've recently pivoted or added a new SKU line, if you've just made it into your first major retailer. So these are all times I would say are maybe not the appropriate time to go through a rebranding. Um, if you were still trying to figure out your product market fit, odds are that means you're probably just starting out. But if you're even a few years into business and you're realizing that like you don't quite know where your product fits, it's super unique, it's not in a specific category, maybe don't go through a change in your brand until you understand where you should actually be, because you don't want to end up having to go through it a second time within a year, right? So on the second point here, if you've recently pivoted or added a new SKU line, the timing for the rebrand would likely be before you pivot or as you're pivoting. But if you've already made a pivot, or whether it's changing your formulation or um, adding products, whatever it is, don't make a change to your entire brand right after all that happened and people are just now getting familiar with the products. Last thing, if you've just made it into your first major retailer, let's say you've been in smaller markets and now you have a chance to go into Whole Foods, you've gotten your products into Whole Foods and they're on shelf, don't make the change 3 months after that. People, those customers of those retailers are just now getting familiar with what your packaging looks like or what your brand represents. And if you make that change, now you kind of give them an opportunity well, I guess, really just not understand what you're all about or what your products are about. And if you're making a change, then kind of going back to that Tropicana thing, they may not recognize your packaging right away. It's okay to make those changes later, strategically, but give it some time once you're into those retailers, or it's actually a better time again, to do the rebranding before you launch into those stores. So either as you're launching, because that's a good way to draw buzz, or have it happen before you get into those major retailers.
One thing I would say as well that we had, like if you're currently selling in a large number of retail chains, if your packaging is changing in terms of like size or formulation, then you usually have to get a new UPC number. And then there's additional cost fees and challenges of getting the new UPC number into a distributor, into a retailer. And so it can also create a lot of headache there as well.
Yeah. All right, number four, small budget, big dreams. So if you have champagne expectations but a LaCroix budget, the fact is you might actually have champagne problems. And if you did not expect today to get a Taylor Swift song reference, well, there you go. Congratulations, you learned something. Champagne Problems is one of our songs. Look it up. Anyways, so point number two, design is visible, but strategy, messaging, and rollout matter as well. And point number three, don't skip on what people see the most. So, um, as I said earlier, if you're going through a rebranding, you want to at least be able to spend more than you did on your whatever the previous iteration of your brand is. And when I say that, like it doesn't mean just for the sake of spending money, right? It means odds are you're able to work with a better branding agency. You're able to, I mean, you know more, you can get deeper, more in depth. Maybe you can get more deliverables and have to do less work yourself on this rebranding. So design is visual, but strategy, messaging, and rollout matter as well. Like I said, a lot of people will come to us and say, like, well, what if we skip the strategy, the brand strategy, and just have you design our new logo and packaging? Well, okay, yes, technically we can do that, but you're gonna have more success when you can consider all the parts that come with launching a new brand. It's going to be more impactful if you can, if you can handle a rollout and not have to do it yourself, but actually work with an agency to do it. So again, don't skip on what people see most. Your brand is what people are going to interact with, whether it's at a trade show, on a shelf, you have displays, it's your website, whatever. It's visual, and a lot of times people are going to see and interact with your brand before they get to actually try your product. So a sort of cliche illustration of this. You guys have seen the whole tip of the iceberg thing a lot, and this is AI's version of tip of the iceberg. To me, I can criticize that a bit, but looking here at like just the things that people think about first is your logo and your packaging design. That's like it's just the first thing that come to mind when people think of branding in the CPG world. But what you don't think about when you're doing a rebranding is all these other things that come along with it too. So, and they are just as important, or at least lead to what your packaging and the outcome of your logo might look like. Number 5 here, misaligned goals. Make it fun, premium, and edgy, but also family friendly and rustic. Yeah, those are all terms that sound really great, and it's very descriptive of your brand. But you can see how they kind of contradict each other, maybe. So that may be a misalignment internally on the brand side of things, whether it's a founder and the marketing person or co-founders, all not having a clear understanding of what the direction of their brand should be. Number 2, a confused brief equals a confused brand, kind of tying back into that first one. But third point here, getting aligned on outcomes, not just the aesthetics. So a lot of times when we're working with a client, we talk about what would make this rebranding a success. And then when it comes to branding, it's not exactly measurable. It's very hard to measure the impact and result of branding. It's not like marketing and advertising where you can run digital ads and tie specific purchases in your website back to a specific digital ad, or an advertising campaign in a magazine ad, if people still do that, of like, here, go to this specific link or use this promo code. You can't really do that as much with branding. So getting a clear understanding of, does success mean that there's just better recognition of your brand at events? Does it mean that success means you've been able to add a certain amount of new stores, or you've been able to break the barrier of getting into larger retailers versus small retailers? Really just getting aligned on what those goals are. But also, of course, all that process in a rebranding is, talking about the strategy, talking about the messaging to the customer, all that too. So to illustrate this example is a car with 2 steering wheels and 2 drivers going down the road. If one's the client and one is a branding agency, or consider it's 2 co-founders, one's going to pull the steering wheel one way and one's going the other way, and you end up off the road, or you go down the road straight and clearly this car is driving down the middle of the road, and eventually there's going to be another car coming the other direction. So that might be in terms of a missed opportunity at a retailer. It might mean unclear messaging to the customer. So those are kind of the obstacles you're up against. All right, so what does a good rebrand actually look like? So I'm not talking about necessarily visuals here of what does a good rebrand look like, but the process, the things that you think of when you're doing a rebranding. So number 1, a rebranding, it starts with strategy and not aesthetics. So don't think about like, oh, I just want this to look better or look pretty. We need to have rationale behind everything that you do with the rebranding. Number 2, aligns with your goals and your customer's perception. Number 3, it evolves your brand, not replaces it. This is a tricky one because there are times where you have to pivot and just do a complete 180, but it's very seldom. Like a lot of times you want your brand to be just, it's an evolution. You still want people to understand, like when they go to the grocery store and they see your new brand, that there's a tie back to your old branding, so people can at least make the connection that it's the same product. Especially when there's times that as you're going through the transition, you may still have old packaging on the shelf next to your new packaging, and it's going to be very confusing if you have two products named the same thing, but they look completely different. So just to help with that transition, brand should be an evolution and not a complete replacement. Number four, the rebranding should boost clarity and not confusion. So your message should be much clearer every time you make a rebrand or every time you make a change to your brand. Your message should be much clearer to that customer. You should be talking to a more clear individual, as well as having a more clear message for that individual. So to kind of show this little flow chart here, I mentioned it earlier. Your brand strategy is going to lead to your visual identity. So your brand strategy is your positioning within your market. It's your customers, it's your unique selling points, your differentiators, your messaging pillars. All of those things lead to what your brand identity or your visual identity should look like. Your visual identity is your logos, your fonts, your colors, your photographic treatments, your tone of messaging, patterns and textures that are part of your visuals. All of those are pieces that then direct what your design material should look like. Often that's your packaging. So using those fonts, colors, logos, whatever. And then of course, successful packaging should lead to a positive customer impact. How do you know if you actually need to rebrand? Or another question that's similar to this is, how do you know when it's the right time to rebrand? So, you know if you need to rebrand when you've conquered the small markets, but you look out of place at a major retail. So if you put your product on the shelf next to other products on like Target or Whole Foods, does it actually look like it fits there, or does it stand out like a sore thumb? That's a good sign that you maybe are ready for a change within your branding. You're attracting the wrong customers. There's oftentimes as you grow your company that you realize that the people who are buying your product are not the ones you expected. So usually that means that there's a something wrong with your messaging, something wrong with your brand visuals. It doesn't necessarily mean that you don't want those people buying your product. It might mean that you just need to change what your messaging is so that you are connecting the right way with the people who are already buying your product. Number three, your look is dated or inconsistent. If you're not a visual person or like someone that has a creative mind or an eye for design, then this may be harder to notice, but typically go back to that first point. If you can put your product next to other similar products or other larger brands, and it just looks like it doesn't have the same level of quality design, then that's probably a good sign to you. Your brand no longer reflects your values. So kind of like the customers one, if your brand values change, maybe you've added a charitable aspect to it, or you've kind of changed your mission, but your branding and your messaging doesn't reflect that, that's probably a good sign. And then last, if you're making a pivot or you're altering product formulation. So I talked about this earlier about not changing your brand right after you've pivoted or right after you've added new products or right after you've gotten into a new retailer, but do all these things as the pivot is happening or slightly before it so that when you make a pivot or you add new products or you want to change your formulation, those are really good times to make that change with your brand as well. Okay. Sorry, having a drink. How do you make your rebrand a success? As a founder, as a early stage, CMO within your CPG brand. So, what should you as a brand bring to the table when you're working ideally with another agency? You should bring your clear goals. What does success look like for this rebranding? Number two, having an understanding of your budget. That might mean it doesn't mean that you have to have $100,000 to go through a rebranding, but it should mean that you have a clear understanding of what you're willing and able to spend on such a project so that your branding agency can help develop what are the better assets that are going to make most sense for that situation, giving you the best opportunity to whether it means working with them on everything or, allowing your agency to provide you the assets and the tools to do things on your own if you need.
Adam, I do have a question. I get this question from founders all the time and went through it myself in terms of like how much should I pay for a branding project or packaging design? Because I've literally seen ranges from like $1,000 to $150,000.
Yeah.
And there's that sense of like, how much should I be budgeting? Is there really a difference between a $10,000 project and a $150,000 project? Kind of what's the right fit for me and my brand? What does it kind of get me?
Yeah. So I would say as a smaller brand, let's say you've been in business for a few years, you've gotten traction, and now your goal is to start getting into bigger retailers. You should probably plan to spend between 20 and 40,000. If you're like super new or only a year in and you kind of realize, well, I'm like there's a mistake in my branding, I want to work with a professional. You can probably look in the 10 to 20 range, and that would be, I think, acceptable. The 50,000 plus range is kind of reserved more for those they're already in the big retailers. They're trying to gain more market share. And that's kind of their purpose for doing a rebranding. Is that at least helping answer? I think a
Yeah,
range is
that's
close enough.
helpful.
Yeah. Um, where was I? Number three. So what to bring to the table, number three, is as much customer data as possible. So having a really clear understanding of who the customers are that you're targeting beyond just demographics, but like we want to know what's their lifestyle like, what's important to them, what is, their day to day, but also like what's their purchasing behavior, what stores do they shop at, what other products do they own. All of these things help us as a branding agency really like hone in very specifically on how we can like strike a chord with that customer to make them want to at least be interested in trying a new product. Because it's really hard to get someone to try a new product without them having a chance to taste it first. Number four, understanding of your competitors. So similar as the customers, but understanding all of your competitors on the shelf. What are their price points? What makes them unique? Like, is it they have better quality? Is it a lower price? Is there something else that's unique about their product that or is there just similarities with the rest of the category that all of these things really help you and your agency figure out the positioning that you should approach your brand with. So what actually makes you unique or how can you build the brand to be different than the rest of the category? Number five, have an open mind and then trust. So being open to what your agency is going to kind of bring to you, and trust that, at least if you're working with a branding agency like us that focuses specifically on CPG brands, trust that we know what we're talking about with terms of consumer behavior. We understand CPG world very well. We understand even what it's like to get your products in front of retail buyers and what messages they're looking at, but also how do you appeal to shopping customers in retail versus a B2B business or you know what have you, anything that's just not CPG, right? So looking at a successful rebrand example that we've done. So Fancy Freeze is probably one of the more recent ones, I think, that, or at least the more successful recent ones, is at least a good example. So Fancy Freeze is they actually started as a burger joint in Boise, Idaho, and I think they have two locations out there, but it's kind of this 1950s era restaurant, known for their shakes, and they're like very indulgent burgers and fries and all. Just like every major city kind of has these nostalgic places, right? Well, they came to us and they were wanting to turn their milkshakes into a retail product. But at that time, like they also realized, well, it's a it's a good transition time to go through this rebranding. They need to have a little bit more strategic approach. You can see at least their old logo on the left, which was something that I'm sure either a friend or a freelancer or something did a long time ago. It honestly looks like kind of clip art, so who knows? But there were aspects of it, and what I was talking about earlier of your brand being an evolution and not just replacing it, we wanted to look at things that were going to resonate. That's already. connected to their customers that they're going to remember. So we don't want to make a completely drastic change. But how can we kind of bring it into this new century, at least feeling a little more modern, but still keeping callbacks to their original branding. So looking at things like the ribbon, looking at the colors, and everything. There's other aspects of their brand as well too. And I'll point those out. So we did a pretty in-depth rebranding with these guys, focused on the brand as a whole. And I'll on the next slide here talk about the retail products. But we went to the links of designing. We went through a whole brand guide that we built out for them that goes through not only just your logo system, but their fonts, all their colors. We looked at certain taglines. This was part of the messaging output. We showed the brand in use here. There's direction for photography styling, like, that should be more casual. It doesn't have to be professional all the time for them. It just made sense, but also looking at things like patterns. How do all these things come together visually and verbally to build your branding? So all of those that brand identity led to the packaging design. So this new product, there's two milkshakes inside of a pouch here. But you can see how the visual cues from the branding turned into their packaging. So keeping, of course, their logo being prominent, just the styling that we chose to go with, like these big blocky bold lettering. Otherwise, a pretty clean design to keep things simpler and not feeling like it's, we want the nostalgic part, which is the side panels have this cool pattern on the side and kind of the treatment of the text and stuff on the back. But on the front, big solid colors were a way to grab attention pretty well in the frozen section. And then we're happy, of course, to share that so they first launched in Albertsons up in that territory in the Northwest. And within the first few months, I don't remember if it's still ongoing now, but within the first few months, they shot straight up to the highest selling frozen novelty in Albertsons in all the stores that they were in. So that led to them getting into Safeways and Deerbergs and Schnucks, and I think their distribution continues to grow. So that's what success looked like for that client. It wasn't a measurable number of amount of sales. It was the ability to get into these retailers and now continuing to grow. Okay, a couple final thoughts. So if you do have any last questions, guys, now's a good time to start thinking of those, and then I'll try to be brief here, and I'll go a little bit longer than I expected. But two final thoughts here, and I'll be quick with them. So first, rebranding is a business decision. It's not a design one. Do it for the right reasons and doing it right. So it is it's a big impactful thing when it comes to your brand. And it shouldn't just be taken lightly, and it shouldn't just be a matter of finding someone on Fiverr to put together a cool design. And lastly, a good product will always be a good product, whether the branding is good or not. So I like to say that your branding, if you have a good product, your branding will not make or break you. It can open up doors and open opportunities to you, but giving this example here of Dot's Pretzels, which has become a super popular product. They're a fellow Midwestern company. I spoke with the owner not long ago too when they were going through this rebrand. But the original branding is on the left, and their updated packaging is on the right. And I think they did this back in 2020 or something. But they started to gain popularity. You can see how the design on the left is not like, it's definitely not winning any awards, right? And then when they made the change to the rebrand, when I spoke to the owner, I had apparently started that conversation just like shortly after they had started this rebranding project, which is how it always goes for us. But again, you can see that it's not winning any awards. It's not like super impactful for like this really awesome designed packaging. It looks really good. And that's what I'm going to say is that when they did this rebranding, there's just more clarity with how they approached at least the packaging redesign. The logo had slight changes to it, but you still recognize those two logos when they're on the shelf. This element on the front here made it clear of which flavor this was. They used red on the outside of these, but they have other flavors. It wasn't necessarily easy to understand that. And of course, the big color block at the bottom, again, helps differentiate flavors and stuff. So there were some things that they did right. I still think, I wouldn't be surprised to see these guys make another rebranding in the next couple of years, is all I'll say. The product itself is growing huge and doing really well, but and it's tasty. I would encourage you all to try it. But I would imagine that they're probably getting to a point now where they got to start. They're competing with bigger brands as well, and they'll probably make a change in the next couple of years. All right, last page. If you guys have questions, want to answer them, we'll give you some time. But of course, if you want to learn more about Avidity Creative and what we do and who we work with and what we do for them, go to aviditycreative.com. And if you want to connect with me personally, I love that. I love just meeting new people in the industry. Want to hear your story, want to see how I can help you, whether that's with business or if it's just giving you advice or feedback. But find me on LinkedIn and connect with me there and let me know that you found me through the Food Battery webinar, and then I can tie these things back to it. So
Adam, thank you so much for this. This is awesome. I love going into all those details and points, so absolutely appreciate it. We did get a couple of questions to me, so I'm going to invite some people up. I hope I'm saying your name right. Is it Simrit? Do you want to come up and ask your question?
Yeah, that's right.
do you want me to still share screen?
You can turn the screen sharing off.
Okay, cool. Good. And I can see bigger faces, not just feel like I'm talking to my presentation. All right, go ahead, Simrat.
Yeah, I had a couple of questions.
Yeah.
Well, just a general comment first. Yeah, I have been finding it difficult to know what is like the close to perfect enough label to release to the public. But I think one thing that would help is like I have some ideas for brand story, but I've told that it can be better to differentiate what I have right now from my competitors.
Mhm.
Where would you recommend someone turn to for assistance in finding like that ideal brand positioning and brand story?
I mean, if you're talking about doing it on your own, obviously, like I would say, like an agency is going to help you do that, and like we would happy to talk with you. But in terms of trying to do that on your own, I find that making whether it's a spreadsheet or just like a chart of like all of your competitors, and list out their prices, list out their differentiators or what they claim to be their unique part. And you'll see that on their packaging. Make a column with just like pictures of their packaging. And this would like gives you a really clear understanding of like what you're up against in the category, and then put your stuff in there and see like, is this different enough? Is the messaging clear of how you're different? And that should be enough. What and as far as like finding out if your label is perfect, I mean without me being able to see it, I guess I can give you feedback if you want to send me an image. But I would say if if you're getting positive feedback from it, or if you're working with a designer who has experience in the area, I guess trust their input. Um, but as long as you have your messaging right and are calling out like how your product is different, then you're basically like 90% of the way there.
Okay. And then I had another question as well. So you talked about customer data, but how would you get the customer data to support post-launch to understand if you're targeting the intended customers, if you're only in like retail locations versus direct to consumer?
Yeah. Let me ask first, are you what stage are you at with your brand?
I have a final product and I'm finalizing my labeling.
Okay. So are you in retail stores right now or not yet?
Not yet, in the coming months.
Okay. Do you go to like farmers markets or anything with your event yet? Or excuse me, with your product yet?
No, I didn't want to until I finalized my label.
Okay. So at least at the stage you're at when you're just starting, a lot of it is speculation. You probably have a pretty good idea, and I think again you can kind of get most of the way there by making some assumptions of who's going to want to buy your product. But as soon as you actually can get the product in front of people, um, try to keep like reference as much as you can of who's actually buying it. So if you do go to farmers markets, which are a good way to get a good idea of like who your audience is, whether it's making mental notes and like writing notes down after the event, or keeping a physical tally of like general demographics. Like you can talk to the people and ask them like, oh, like how'd you hear about us? Like, what's your family like? Like, do you I mean, some of the questions you got to figure out a way to not be like too intrusive, but like understanding like, is it, is it a couple that's coming up to you that's in their late 30s? Then maybe ask them like, do you guys have kids, whatever. Like you can figure that out part. But you can understand age and like gender generally, of the type of people that are buying your product. So you can get it. A lot of products can be kind of somewhere in the middle, but generally you can mostly know, is this a more masculine facing or more feminine facing product? And then that leads you to determining what your branding could look like, really. But the more you're in those stores, and if you get into actual retail stores, the managers of those stores can tell you about the types of people that typically shop at their store. So that's a good way to get information from them, like the actual data. They may or may not have like hard data, like numbers to work with, but they can at least give you a pretty clear idea of who shops there.
Awesome. I think one other thing I recommend is if you can go to events and start, like once you get the initial kind of packaging, like start presenting and getting customer feedback in terms of how they're reading it, like what they're interested in, what they like, what they don't like, and like how would you describe this product? You can see if what you're trying to say is what they are receiving. And I also put a link in the chat for product label testing. Really, it's just any image testing. There's a site called PicFu where you can actually create like different versions of your label design and then get survey responses from people. The downside is they might not be like your target demographic, but you can ask questions on like which one do you like more, but then also like how do you understand the product differently this way or this way, or I'm trying to communicate the other product does this, which image does that better? You can get some directional information that way.
Yeah.
Thank you. I don't see that link, unfortunately.
Oh, sorry. I put it in the wrong chat thing
Okay.
here.
Thank you.
Okay. Yep. There it is there. And then I also am putting in a link to our Foodbevy product market fit calculator. But once you start getting customers, there's a survey that you can actually use to determine if your product is reaching that product market fit level or not, that you can use as well.
Okay, thanks.
Perfect. Neela, do you want to come up? I know you had a question as well.
Yeah, thanks, Jordan,
Leila.
and thanks, Adam.
Yeah.
That was very informative, and I think my question may or may not have been answered, but I'll still ask you the question again. So, Madrasi, we are a chai concentrate company, and we do at farmers market, and we do our e-commerce as well. Now we're trying to scale up. We're trying to get into retail stores. So we're considering changing our packaging. And you were talking about how rebranding has destroyed some brands and it has also helped some brands grow. Now, just asking, before going for the big launch, is it possible to sample and test and get customer information? If that is possible, I want to know how to go about defining who the sample should be, and how can I go about testing before I go in for a large scale production?
I mean, the link that Jordan just put in there is probably the best way to get actual like some sort of data about like a new brand or a new label design.
Okay.
Trying to think of other ways you can test it. Like it's if you're doing sampling events, like whether it's farmers markets or other stuff, you can put examples of the new packaging out there. You can ask, don't ask the questions of like so when people come up for your sample to get a free sample from you, don't ask them which packaging do you like better, because odds are it's going to be pretty clear that the new packaging should be better. If that's not clear, they might have a problem anyways. But you ask them questions like, is the messaging more clear on this new packaging, or does this messaging make sense to you? Do these call outs of like, does this packaging make it more clear of what makes our product different from others? And there's probably better ways to say it, but like generally that's the questions you want to ask them.
Okay. And if one of the objectives for changing the packaging is cost, like for example, if I'm going from one form, say, from a pouch to a Tetra Pak or to a bottle, how do I understand if my customer is okay with buying the current packet at the current price, or will I have an advantage of um, changing the packaging at a lower price? Is there a way to assess that?
And I can share on that too.
Sure.
Just because with Food Bevy, or not with Food Bevy, with my brand T Squares, we had a larger like multi-serve pouch, and then
Mhm.
we got a feedback of like $6.99 retail that the price was too expensive. So we lowered the size and lowered the cost to like a $3.99 bag. What we
Okay.
actually found was that the volume difference did not make up for the loss um in the lower price. So we actually lost money because we sold a few more units on volume, but we did
Mm.
not actually sell more to make up for that lost difference. And so I do say like proceed carefully with thinking that, oh, if there's a lower price or a lower cost, then we're going to sell a higher volume to make up for it because it doesn't always work.
And
Wow, that's insightful.
I'm guessing, Jordan, you probably had a set like time period for you to be able to make that decision, because you can't make that after like a week of being on shelf, but you probably said after 6 months or whatever your timeline was of like, was that a good move or was it not? And as soon as you realize that it's not, of course, you probably made the change to go, whether it's back or make a different change to it.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
Does
Great.
that answer the
Okay.
question, Neil? Otherwise, I'm happy to kind of elaborate too on, I might have to have you repeat exactly what the question was.
No, so
Because we are
I
at the
understood.
beginning, let's do this, Neela. If you were able to connect with Adam after, I didn't want to get one more
Sure.
question in before we're at the end.
Yeah,
No,
and
thank you.
I don't have anything going on after this. I don't want to keep people like super long. I'll try to be brief with my answers now. But if anyone who does want to keep sticking around, I'm happy to. But obviously, Jordan, you'll probably have other stuff you have to do too.
Perfect. Yep. And if anyone needs to hop off, definitely understand. We'll listen to the last one, the recording over, but we'll wrap up in just a couple of minutes. But yeah, if anyone does have any other questions, you can connect with Adam directly. We'll put your info in there as well. But I did know, Marlena, you had a question as well, about kind of knowing when to do
Yeah.
a brand. So if you want to ask that.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you for the webinar. So I'm representing Sugar Bliss right now. We're a bakery in Chicago, but we operate in 3 segments. So we have like the brick and mortar store where we have in-store clients that like through walk-ins, but also there we have our corporate catering from like offices downtown or like personal events people order for. Then we also operate in the food services industry where we do more like partnerships with bigger corporations like the Bears or McCormick Center in Chicago. And then we also pretty recently branched into the consumer product good industry with our 3 shelf stable cookies. And right now we kind of find ourselves in that stage. Adam, you were talking about of we just hit like making it into bigger retailers. And I wanted to ask like so we launched in Walgreens, and at the end of August we're launching in Mariano. So I kind of wanted to ask in that stage, I don't know, like how long does it take for consumers to really see you in retailers, and then like how much time should you give before you think about some sort of rebrand in that stage?
Yeah. Well, congrats first off for getting that far. That's I mean, accomplishment in its own. I would say the good amount of time to give after making it into a new retailer, somewhere between, I would say almost a minimum like 9 months. Like you want to, a year is probably ideal. Like you can start planning a rebrand before that time period. Just make sure you don't launch before a year. And even then, like a year to year and a half is enough time that those customers and those retailers have had enough exposure to your brand to at least start recalling things. And as long as your new brand isn't a complete 180, then there should be enough like continuation, recognition of the name, recognition of colors on the packaging. Colors are probably one of the most important things that people latch onto. Like when you think you're going down, I mean, maybe ketchup's a bad example, but when you're walking to that category, you're looking for something red and you're going to see Heinz or Hunt and whatever. But there's other categories that the same thing happens where, let's see, in the snack aisle, I know like our family buys a lot of club crackers, and I know that their box is green. And if they were to change that, they could still have the name club on the front of their packaging, and I would have no idea where like that they're still there. I would just think it's a different brand. So color is a big important factor in packaging. So making a major change to the color, like little like minor shifts is okay. But like let's say, you know, like over my shoulders here, here's the this way, I'm reversed, is Fancy Freeze, and then over this shoulder here is Geem. It's a smaller brand that we did, but it's like a super bright green color. And if we were to make a change to the layout of their design that just had a lot less of that bright neon green, customers would probably lose that. So we actually did go through an iteration of their packaging, and so there's a change between version 1 and version 2, but the main background color being the super vibrant neon green is still there. So that's something to keep in mind when you're going through that rebrand there.
Okay,
Marley.
totally. Thank you so much.
Perfect. Thank you so much, everyone, for the questions and for staying with us today. Adam, thanks so much again. If anyone has any other questions or is thinking about branding and wants to look at what that process looks like, I've added Adam's email into the chat. Feel free to reach out directly. Or if you want an introduction, reach out to me if you lose his email. Other than that, thanks so much for joining. Adam, thanks again. And everyone have a great week.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Jordan. I appreciate it.